Hello, Chipmunk and Chipette fans. My name is Grandy Tamias, and welcome back to another installment of Alvin and the Chipmunks Elaborations. Today's topic will be, should the Chipmunk Adventure be rebooted, or in what way should it be rebooted? Now, in the past, I talked about the sequel potential of the original film, but since that's essentially impossible, now I want to try looking at this film from the angle of a potential reboot, in part or in full. Depending on the kind of Alvin and the Chipmunks fan that you are, you might be having a different reaction to the proposal of this concept. If you're a staunch supporter of the 80s era version of Alvin and the Chipmunks and the original film, you might be against this completely and think, oh, the Chipmunk Adventure is perfect. I also wouldn't be surprised if some of you are against this based on the principle of reboots in general, but if you're closer to the live-action and 2015 series versions of Alvin and the Chipmunks, you might be fine with this or just not care. But I think it's important to specify what I mean by a reboot, since the entire franchise has had reboots, most of which span into other mediums, like how the 80s era has the show and film in the same loose continuity, and the Alvin show had comics and continuity that was even looser, so it didn't really matter. Personally, I doubt any new franchise reboot would or should start with redoing the plot of the Chipmunk Adventure, because the original movie never took the time to introduce the characters since there had already been 4 seasons of the TV show up to that point. I also think, given that no iteration of Alvin and the Chipmunks is going on with new media at the moment, the Chipmunk Adventure is unlikely to be rebooted in one of them. So if it ever happens, it's going to have to be in a new continuity of the franchise. And because you'd have to introduce the characters again first, it'd be impossible to cram those together in a cohesive movie. If it's a film reboot, I don't see it happening until at least the 3rd film in that new continuity. If it's in a TV-centric reboot, I don't see it happening as a theatrical film the way that the original Chipmunk Adventure was. Theatrical movie continuations of TV shows aren't as much a thing anymore because audiences have become so accustomed to the I shouldn't have to consume media from a different source to understand this movie argument. I do agree that TV continuations of movies should only be supplemental and not required for movies afterward. Disney plus Marvel shows. But if a movie is made as a continuation of a TV show, it is expected that you would have seen the TV show first because that's why the movie was made. Things can be made purely for fans, and of the relatively few people who saw the Chipmunk Adventure in cinemas, most of them were likely familiar with the TV show first. Even if there were kids who did get into Alvin and the Chipmunks for the first time from the Chipmunk Adventure, they likely didn't care since the movie gets on with the entertaining shenanigans pretty quickly. That may seem like it goes against what I said a moment ago about the continuity itself already needing to be established, but it really doesn't when you consider the context in which the movie was created. While the cartoon did provide origin stories for the characters, with the Chippettes even being alluded to in the film, most of the stories were standalone. It was from these smaller stories in bite-sized chunks that gave viewers a more comprehensive glimpse into the Chipmunks and Chippettes' personalities. Parts of that do bleed over into the Chipmunk Adventure, like the Alvin and Brittany rivalry dynamic, but for most people, it's not enough to get them attached to these characters early on. But getting back to the aspect of the Chipmunk Adventure getting rebooted in a primarily TV-based continuity, a film doesn't necessarily have to be theatrical. It could just be a TV movie that's just a longer episode or set of episodes. If it's a set of episodes, it could be an arc at the tail end of a season, provided the series commits to continuity, in the sense of the act of following events, not the reboot timeline universe itself. So those are the only ways that I could see the storyline of the Chipmunk Adventure being rebooted. Faithfully, that is, in terms of following the plot beat for beat, more or less. There's also the matter of whether the plot of the Chipmunk Adventure is something modern audiences would even be willing to see. And to that I say, no. If the Chipmunk Adventure was released today, it would not hold up to audience standards and scrutiny for more reasons than just it being connected to a TV show. The Chipmunk Adventure's mixed to positive reputation is more so kept alive for the fact of when it was released and being a product of its time, as well as it being one of the few non-Disney animated films of its kind. I mean, it has Disney-quality animation in terms of it being fluid, but that's more so because Bagdasarian hired a lot of Disney animators after they were laid off from the failure of The Black Cauldron. And a lot of animators at that time worked for multiple companies anyway. Oh, and before I forget, modern company absorbing Disney! I went off track there, but the point is, the story of the Chipmunk Adventure has not aged well. Like, Getting Lucky would not fly today. And other parts of the movie would have been a whole lot worse had they incorporated some of the scenes from the earlier version of the script, which I found last year. Though, like I said in that video, I do still think that there are some neat concepts that I would have loved to see or hope to be adapted in a new reboot. Like, for example, the scene where, instead of ending up in Bermuda, the Chipettes end up at the San Diego Zoo and cross paths with some Boy Scouts. And that, in a way, brings me to the last way that I could see the Chipmunk Adventure being rebooted. And that is, not at all, and just homaging it more often in newer media. There have been a handful of instances where shots have been reenacted or plot lines have been referenced, like the Chipmunks in Road Trip having to trick an old lady so they can go on an adventure. Although the manner in which they do it is different, as in Road Trip they dress up squirrels to look like them, after drugging them, whereas in the Chipmunk Adventure, they recorded a phone call and edited it to say, I want Alvin, Simon, and Theodore to meet me in yada yada yada. I expect a modern, faithful version of that would be very similar, except instead of a tape, it'd be an audio software. The 80s. I suppose you could say that the Chipmunk Adventure was referenced in Shipwrecked as well, when Theodore mentioned a hot air balloon, and obviously that's a big aesthetic thing in the Chipmunk Adventure. And I might be stretching it with this one, but I think the moment where Brittany's hair grows frizzy is a reference to when that happened to her and the other Chipettes when they landed in Bermuda. I would like more deep-cut references like those, not just in regards to the Chipmunk Adventure, but other episodes of the franchise too. But even some more obvious homages would be appreciated, as long as they're not too in our faces. And really, this desire to have more overt references that make the Chipmunk Adventure more important is not really any different from how Transformers so often has references to its 1986 movie, which, like the Chipmunk Adventure, was also a movie continuation of an 80s cartoon, included celebrity voice roles, had great music, unfortunately bombed at the box office, but went on to gain a cult classic status. In a way, though, I do feel like the Chipmunk Adventure had failed to accomplish the degree of influence on the rest of its franchise that Transformers 1986 had. And that might be in large part because, as I mentioned in my TCA sequels video, Ross Bagdasarian Jr. and Janice Carmen weren't proud at first with the result of the movie, as after its premiere, they went 20 years without rewatching what they had made. Sure, they used assets from the movie, such as songs in later episodes, but as far as the movie itself, I just don't think that they were proud of the story. Sure, it is flawed in terms of writing, I've been over that, and the animation has some hiccups, but I personally think that it has a lot of value and deserves to be remembered not just by audiences, but by the parts of the franchise that succeeded. I mean, the Chipmunk Adventure was the very first Alvin and the Chipmunks movie. It's an important milestone when you consider how far the franchise had come since the Ross Bagdasarian Sr. era. And it was the true intended debut of Miss Miller, who was created for the movie, but would end up being incorporated into the cartoon during the movie's production, and who has since appeared in or influenced later reboots. Aside from her, the film didn't introduce any concepts that in any way redefined Alvin and the Chipmunks. Sure, it is important that the stories and characters stay true to themselves, which they did after the movie, but to leave a lasting impact, especially for a movie continuation, one has to change the game. Despite all that, there are still elements of the Chipmunk Adventure that I wish would be revisited. Case in point, Claudia Furstein. She may have been a villain for the sake of giving the Chipmunks and Chipettes, as well as the audience, someone to fear, but she's so unique in that you wouldn't expect her to have come out of a franchise about singing rodents. And what makes her so intimidating is not just the interactions that she has with the protagonists in the few times that we see them together, but also how she was able to pull the strings behind the scenes and affect what was happening to them. Not to mention the memorable dynamic that she has with her brother Klaus, who she pushes around. Klaus may not have much of a character because of that, but the fact that Claudia as an antagonist is able to push around other antagonists further adds to her intimidation factor. And we can't forget about Claudia's Yorkie Terrier, Sophie, who adds even more entertainment value by acting as an extension of Claudia that causes even more trouble for Klaus. And fun fact, Sophie almost didn't exist. She's completely absent from the 1985 draft of the script and was added in after Ross and Janice's real-life Yorkie Terrier, Tiger Lily, was tragically struck by a car and died, which also inspired the Season 6 episode Cookie Chomper III. I think that all of these aspects combined make Claudia a great villain, and if there's any part of the Chipmunk Adventure that should be rebooted, it's her. Along with Klaus and Sophie, obviously. I think that she should be treated like this franchise's Unicron, and have her be the ultimate threat for the Chipmunks and Chipettes to face. Probably for a one-time event, though maybe not with the same motive of the smuggling race as in the original movie. I believe that there is potential to use her in a new setting under different circumstances. And I think, what better way to honor the legacy of the Chipmunk Adventure than by bringing back one of its original characters? They did that with Miss Miller, technically, and in the 2015 series, she was pretty faithful to her 80s counterpart. I imagine a version of Claudia in that series would have been great too. I know this got pretty far off from the point of this video, but honestly, I think whatever the next reboot ends up being has an opportunity and should include some form of tribute to the Chipmunk Adventure. Whether that be a story with a hot air balloon race, locations that they visited, quotes, reenacted poses, reviving old concepts from the script, or new takes on its original characters. Heck, maybe something as simple as the Around the World in 30 Days arcade game cabinet in the background of someplace. It would be a deep-cut reference, but wouldn't that be fun? Just something to let us hardcore AATC fans know that we're appreciated for loving this film for nearly 4 decades. Anyway, feel free to let me know in the comments. Would you like to see the story of the Chipmunk Adventure incorporated into a new Alvin and the Chipmunks reboot? If so, how thoroughly? And what are your favorite aspects about the film that you think should be used in new Alvin and the Chipmunks media? You're also welcome to leave suggestions for future topics of Alvin and the Chipmunks Elaborations, and if you would like to keep up with me outside of my videos, you can join my Discord server or follow me on Twitter. Links to both will be in the description. Quick insert here as I was editing this video. The channel has just passed 3,000 subscribers, which thank you all so much for that. And this is actually the 3rd time that I've passed 1,000 subscribers in time for a Chipmunk Adventure video. I don't know why this keeps happening, but I'm very glad for it. Let's try and reach 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers by the time of the next one. Again, thank you all so much, and that's gonna pretty much wrap things up for this video, so with all that said, I hope you enjoyed, have a nice day, and thank you for your time.